Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang anuttarang upajayang namasami. As I was getting ready for the alms round there were some napkins, and as monks, we're not supposed to take anything that isn't given, so I asked, may I have a napkin from someone? And they said, I think so. And I said, oh, maybe I should find somebody else. And I said, well, I think this is set up this is from Clear Mountain Monastery, these napkins there. I think the tea and the whole setup is Clear Mountain. And then I said, well, I mean, not Clear Mountain Monastery, there's no place yet. But then I thought, no, there's now a Clear Mountain Monastery, there is a place. And of course, that's, I think, probably coming up in a lot of people's minds. I would guess these two venerables are thinking about it a bit. So there's been a trajectory over the years since I knew the two of them, for a much longer time, lived with them in different monasteries, and but then remembered that this was a intention that was set actually when we started living together in White Salmon, and so I'm happy seeing that it's brought fruits, and I always said well, now there's once there's land, then that's when things really begin. There's these two could have used the colloquial word, I'll say, bailed at any point, but now they can't. They're stuck. As long as the lawyers work it out, then hopefully the land will be used as intended. But there's always that possibility, and as I've been at Abhayagiri recently, we've had a 30-year anniversary. So 30 years ago, similarly, a monastery was started in Northern California, and I know that both venerables here have sent many of you down there, say this is what a forest monastery is like, this is what an American forest monastery is like, and so you've had some experiences or lived vicariously through other people who've had those experiences. And over this last, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, we had the part one of the 30-year anniversary. And there was some, we went over a photo album, and so I think the monastery started about 5-6 years before I started showing up as a guest, and then 10 years when I started as an anagarika there. And it was interesting to see because a lot of the faces that were in these photos are not there anymore. Not because they're dead, but because that just life changes, right? So this is what we chanted: change is the nature of conditioned things. So if I was to watch these kind of this yearbook that was being, or 30 yearbook, this anniversary book that was being presented on a screen with a bunch of photos, and say, why are they not here? And what did these people had all these intentions to do this and that? But we know this is how things work in the human realm. People come in and out, and even starting something and then not being a part of it, it's all good, really. And then there were some people who actually came out of the woodwork I hadn't seen in a long time, and they were in the first year photos, and they were sitting there 30 years later, looking older, and it was quite beautiful to see that continuum So what I wanted to talk about a little bit in a short period of time is the long game, and whether one kind of sticks with helping start the monastery out here or not. That's not actually the important thing. It's really what we're doing with our lives in terms of our we say practice. But just talking recently, Ajahn Siddhanta and myself and Tanjoti Manto at the Pacific Hermitage were talking about that word and thinking the word cultivate is a much better word. And I was just reminded of that with the tools that were spoken about, how useful tools would be for the new monastery. And so if you think about this as a cultivation, and you think about this as really the long game, how can you keep yourselves interested? How can you be one of the people who is actually looking after your own practice, your own cultivation, and making that last, you know? Because it's very easy to come at something and just be interested at first and like, wow, this is great, these monks are so cool, and you know, I want to be more like them, and but then we get busy with something else and move on. So in terms of what we're doing with our cultivation is we're really wanting to take a very active approach with it and watch, you know, when our minds are moving away from our good intentions, because it's very easy to slip away. It's very easy to kind of have these interests and then for that to become boring, right? Human beings, we're born in this realm, the sense realm, and we're often very addicted to our senses. We're addicted to kind of getting something. And if that thing becomes sort of not very interesting, then we lose that interest. And so we are really responsible ourselves. Each one of us is responsible for keeping that interest up if we want to kind of keep with this long game, the long game of cultivation. And so really that's kind of looking at the tools we have and making sure that they're sharp and that we know how to use them. Because it's not always the case that we know how to use them, and it's also the case that we can kind of forget that something's useful, that we learned about. I remember at Baigiri, you could maybe have a sense from these two or any of the monastics you met. We're quite different. Some of us come from very different backgrounds. So some of us are like blue-collar workers, others, even some have spent time being homeless, others have been PhDs, all the whole range. And some people, you know, can join up a bit early, be a little bit naive. I remember there was one monk explaining how he would talk to another monk through things, and he would say, okay, this is a washing machine, this is how you use a washing machine. It's like, wow, that's amazing, and it washes your clothes. Oh, that's great. I think my parents just did this. I didn't really. Another famous one was very good. He was new, he was an anagarka, and then he was handed a shovel. He took the shovel, and he's getting some, he said, okay, we want to dig here and move this there, or use this allowable language, you know, a hole might be useful here. And so he's got the shovel in his hand and he says, Venerable, I actually don't know how to use this, which is very surprising, but that's how it can be when we don't know. You know, we're not sure how to actually use these tools. And so some of you have been at this for a long time, and others, this is new, and others, this might have become boring, or you're kind of, might even be stuck at sometimes. You know, what's going on right now? What's the best way to work with this? I don't know. And so it's helpful to try to think of this as a cultivation, like you're cultivating a garden. That was a metaphor that Ajahn Sona had used at my ordination, actually. And when you're cultivating a garden, you want to kind of think about like what it is that you're putting in. You know, what it is, what species, and what will survive here, and what will do best. So you got to know yourself a little bit. You got to know what is best for you. So, sometimes people are very hard on themselves, and then they bring that into their meditation. So, they start pushing themselves, and I do more hours and pay attention more, and start calling themselves an idiot, and they push themselves too hard, not knowing, okay, that's not a useful tool. It could be useful for someone else, that kind of pushing, but maybe not for me, because it's moving me in a direction that's not very helpful. So in that way, we need to know the mood of our mind. We need to know the way that we particularly are. And so there might be more of this, as you have probably experienced, a more metta approach, a softer approach with oneself. And then there's others that are, personality might be kind of more relaxed, or a procrastinator. I'll start when I'm 80. But then it's too late, isn't it? It's too late. So we want to keep thinking about this long game and how we can keep ourselves interested, excited, and that's not always easy. I was driving over here with my friend Jeff, who I was surprised now I've known for 31 years. And so I'm visiting him up. He lives in Paulsbo and drove me over here. And we were driving over here and we're listening to the radio. I hope this is okay, Jeff, to reveal. And on it came, I can't remember, the first one might have been sports, I can't remember. But then I kind of was wondering Jeff's interest in all this, so he switched the channel, and then it was on fishing. So these two guys sounded like they were from Chicago to me, and they were talking about, this, all kinds of different fish, and then they started mentioning something that I appreciated. They were concerned with environmental problems and how this was affecting their interest in fishing. And they're going on and on about this fish, and this year it's good for that, and I actually come from a fishing family, and I remember that at a certain point, at that time, had become vegetarian and didn't, but I would go on these trips. They were a bit torturous. And I had a wrong view too. It's unfortunate, I'll admit it. And I was like, oh, these fish are suffering, so they get pulled out of the water. I don't want them to suffer. So I beat them over the head until they died. And then later realized that wasn't a correct view, and it didn't feel too good either. I digressed a little bit, and I asked Jeff. I said, "Oh, do you fish?" And he said, "No." And I think, oh, this is silly. Why are we listening to this? And I said, why are we listening to this? And Jeff said, well, I kind of like to learn new things. Just kind of like to if there's something that I have no idea about, it's just nice to learn about it, to kind of think about like, wow, I didn't think about that. And indeed, as soon as he said that, I said, oh yeah, this is actually interesting. I mean, these guys are talking in a way that maybe my father or brother would have appreciated. But if I look at it from a different angle, I can see like, okay, what are they talking about? They're talking about all kinds of skills, skills that they're able to have gained in terms of this interest that they have in fishing. And so just like that, we want to kind of look at our practice in a way that we can keep that interest going, and we're not using the same tools over and over again, because that's what isn't always useful. It can be for some. Some people have an adeptness to kind of using the same tool and figuring out different ways how to use it. But sometimes we need to apply ourselves. And as I was saying, something like, I remember being very bored by metta as a practice. And then when I gave it some time and energy, then it had a very different effect. It had a very different feeling for me, and it had good results. But if I just kind of turned it off and just said, like, I can't get interested in this, I just kind of fall asleep whenever I hear somebody doing a guided metta meditation, or I try to say the phrases myself. I'm like, yeah. But then I thought, well, wait a minute, like there must be something I can do here to enhance that. And that was more kind of getting used to, like, oh, it's not just phrases, there's a feeling that's trying to be generated, an experience of metta that we're trying to start, like a motor that we're trying to start that maybe is cold or doesn't have the right fuel in it or something. So we need to kind of work on that. And so I want to also encourage this sense of not giving up on various practices, various cultivations that one is engaged in, and also trying new things. Trying something that's different, that you might actually feel isn't right for you, that you don't particularly like, or it hasn't worked, and say, well, why don't I give it a try? And don't give up just because your measure of what's working is like whether you like it or not, or your measure of working is whether like you have ultimate bliss and peace as soon as it starts, because you won't, because all of a sudden you're using something that you're not skilled at. So it's like learning how to use that shovel. And the monk didn't know how to use it, or the anagarika at the time. As monks, we can't use them so much anymore. But then we have to figure out what to do with that, right? Okay, 3 of us don't, unless it's gravel, we're not allowed to dig in like kind of what we call living dirt that supports life. And so we have to figure out like, okay, either ask for help, or we sometimes learn, you know what, I'm okay with this, I don't need this new hole here or this dug there or whatever. And so there's this kind of constant learning that one is going through. Doesn't matter, whether one's a monastic or a lay practitioner or cultivator. There's always a sense of trying to push ourselves a little bit towards what is skillful, to see how can I kind of change up what's going on, because I don't know if I'm speaking to the choir or not here. Sorry, the chanters are not here. But like, ask yourself about your practice and what do you do when there's dullness, or there's kind of a sense that you've lost a bit of interest and you'd like to regain maybe that called beginner's mind, that excitedness that comes, So in terms of how I started this talk, I was talking about an anniversary, and now that these wonderful monks here are starting a monastery, that can be very exciting. It's like, all right, we got land, we finally did it. And then there might be kind of like, all right, it's done, I guess. Wow, all that kind of work. Maybe I should go sailing. But now, I remember talking to Lumpur Pasno about that. I said, oh, they're all excited, they got land, it's actually purchased, the money was there, and I said, yeah, isn't that great? He said, yeah, now the real work has just started. So that's the long game, right? It's not like, okay, the monks are on the land, it's all done. It's also how to look at this and how to sustain that interest, not only in our practice, but in a way, just, monastics being here, and hopefully that, we as monastics are doing that ourselves. We're really having to work with this cultivation and to try to understand what keeps us in the long game here, what keeps us going, and also sustaining what will keep you going. And then, in a way, having the monks present here on the Clear Mountain Monastery somewhat close by, then that is something that has been put in place for your benefit and for their benefit. So it's, that was a decision that was made, that was an intention that was made. And so it's quite beautiful to see that the fruit is actually there. But just like cultivating a garden, it's not necessarily going to take root in a way that we might have imagined, or maybe as quickly. It's sort of starting to plant seeds and be okay with them being, a little plant. When I was working with one of the monks at Abhayagiri, there were some very small plants that we were planting around this pretty large garden area. And then, various animals would come and destroy them and eat them, and there was admittedly some frustration with that. So I said, I don't want to deal with these little plants anymore. It's too much work. Let's get trees and put in full-grown trees, and then put in trees, and then the bucks, or a buck came over. I remember the tree we just planted, large tree, or whatever. It wasn't that large, but it was 6, 7, 8 feet, and then the bark was stripped off around like 3/4 of it. And the master gardener, the monk who's he has a 20, 30 years experience gardening, is, we didn't talk about it. We saw each other later in a meeting, and he's like, oh, just so dismayed. But this is actually the nature of conditioned things, right? So we want to kind of figure out how to cultivate our garden well with our intentions of how we do things, how we're doing things for our own cultivation and our own practice, to have that kind of, whether we're planting seeds, which takes a lot of work, or planting something that's, already grown. These monks are not just starting right now. They've been going a while. And all of us are in our own various growths, our own various time in our lives. And so we want to approach actually that with a sense of how I was talking about in the meditation. You don't just kind of start running. You kind of have a look at like, what's going on here? What's going on right here in the heart? And what's the best use of how I can cultivate right now? And so you do take a different stance on like whether you plant something from seed, or you have patience to watch it grow, and you also know that some of the seeds won't take, and then there's that kind of being okay. It's like starting something new in your practice, and you're really giving your all, and then it doesn't quite work. But then you see like, oh, there wasn't enough calcium in the soil. I just needed to add something a little bit different. So this is a useful way, I think, to think about what we're doing. We're really cultivating the garden of our mind, and we want to be sensitive to what's needed and the timing and the place, and also that sometimes we'll see something that we think is the answer to why it's not working, but we might be wrong, and we might not understand that. And so we're using our own openness to kind of seeing things differently and trying out something new, something that might be uncomfortable for us, or something that we actually don't want to do, but we move ourselves in that direction anyway, because we're looking at the results. We're always trying to be really scientists of our own minds, and being very careful about those results and seeing like, okay, this is an investigation. So this is the second line we see also from the Buddha. He said, perfect yourselves. So it's really kind of figuring out like what's best for me, what would be best for what I'm doing to create less suffering in my life. You just ask yourself this one question, how do I get myself into trouble? And each person here would have a different answer, right? We all know our own habits, our inclinations. And so what we're trying to do is see that very clearly, because we also know that a lot of us will hide from those inclinations. We will hide from those habits that get us into trouble, but we don't want to change. And that's fine, that's very normal. But what's not fine is then just kind of saying like, well, yeah, I'm kind of attached to this and it's not useful for me, but I'm going to still do it anyway. So that's not helpful for us. And the other thing that often isn't helpful in that situation is just going too far. I'm going to just stop it right now. I'm going to just stop doing this thing. And if it's a major thing in your life, that's not going to work. And you got to I'll just stop on Tuesday for an hour. I won't do this thing. I'll get off my screen or whatever it is. And then you see what the result of that is. Did that actually help? Was there clarity, peace, calm, less dukkha, less suffering, less discontent or dis-ease? And that's really the process. So in the last line there, second to last line, and these are the last instructions, by the way. This is it, the Buddha's last thing he said, is not being negligent. And that's very hard. It's a tough one to swallow, not being negligent, because it's easy to be negligent. That's what, as we're cultivating, we have this other side to us that just wants to kind of sit back and relax, and I don't want to sit right now. In meditation, And so we might avoid that. We might avoid our own cultivation. And the Buddha's just encouraging us. The last words he said before he passed into Nibbana, he said, don't be negligent, because it's so easy. It's very easy to be negligent, but don't make negligence your friend, because it's not a good friend. And so you want to find other friends in the mind that you can trust. The various pathways that you can encourage yourself and find a pathway towards your own goodness, your own intentions, and ask yourself, how can I keep this going? How can I also see that there are good results in this and not forget to notice the good results? Because that's also easy to do. You don't see like that in the end this is a slow burn. The goodness we receive, the good things that are going on for us, they're not usually in gigantic chunks. We don't just kind of get this liberation all at once after our first hour of encountering Buddhism. It takes a long time. And we want to kind of highlight that in our minds, all the goodness that we are receiving just in little ways, because of the little things we're doing when we're not negligent, when we're really kind of putting in that effort. Just the noticing that one time you really want to say something and you say, no, that would not be helpful, and you don't do it. Don't forget that. That's a good reminder before you go to bed. Say, that was a win today. I was going to get myself into trouble, and I didn't. So these are some words of encouragement for you, and just to kind of look at your own cultivation and to see how you can keep yourself in the long game of the Buddha's teaching.
Andamayam Dhammakataya Sadukaram Dharamase Sadhu 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 Anumodami.
In terms of not speaking and getting yourself into trouble, Ajahn Cunda had a story he told about to me at a Q&A about the power of not speaking out of anger. And when he was in Anagarika, he was the kitchen manager and had created an oatmeal version which he would mix all the previous day's donuts in. Am I getting this right? Kind of. Which,
eventually it ended up being that.
It ended up being that. So, which to me sounds great, but apparently one other community member looked at him one day and said, I'm glad you stopped doing that. That was disgusting. And Ajahn Chunda said, in that moment I was just so confused and kind of flabbergasted, I couldn't say anything, and I just kind of walked out of the kitchen. And then 5 minutes later, someone found me and said, that was amazing. You didn't say anything back. Like, that was so beautiful. And so whether it be from flabbergastation or genuine restraint, just the power, embarrassment. And perhaps on Alms Round, Ajahn Chunda will get oatmeal with donuts in it now. Okay. Anyways.
Ajahn Chunda has also coined a term for that, which is foot-in-mouth disorder. So when you say something that you regret. So yeah, now we got time for questions, or if anyone has any comments, things to raise, please feel free to raise your hand. And I think Ryan will bring around a mic. And if anyone on Zoom has any thing they'd like to share, please feel free to raise your hand there.
And we're going to be opening this up to all of our venerables here as well. So just as a chance to kind of tap the collective wisdom of a lot of wonderful teachers at the same time.
Hi, I'm Cynthia. Ajahn Chunda, it's been a long time since I've seen you, and I wanted to say that I think it's 5 years next month since we met, and you were the first monk I met, besides Kantiko, who greeted me when I went to Abhayagiri 5 years ago. And I showed up after my house burned down in Oregon, and I went to Abhayagiri because I was like, that's got to be the refuge. Anyway, so I was very concerned about karma because I didn't know anything about monks or Buddhism or anything, and so I sat in tea time, and I remember asking Ajahn Chunda about my karma because I'd lost, like, everything, my husband, my dog, and now my house, and I was like, for sure, I'd been an axe murderer in my past life. And he said, we've all been axe murderers in our past lives. And I was like, okay. That's a great answer and super helpful. Thank you so much. But what is really helpful to imagine that it didn't feel very helpful at that time. I was kind of shocked, actually. But I am impressed with the wisdom of those words 5 years later about how when you dig down deep in yourself, we've done all the things, and it's helpful to just feel that inside you. And I appreciate you saying that to me 5 years ago. And it's nice to see you again.
Hello, thank you. My name is Tanner. This is my first time here. I've been looking for a Sangha for a while and have gotten back into practicing Buddhism for the past month or so. Something that I struggle with is cultivating metta. I know of the things that you say where you give well-wishings to people. Sometimes I don't mean it. When I say, may this person be happy and healthy and free from harm, I feel like I'm lying. And I don't know how to overcome that. How do I cultivate metta when I don't mean the well-wishings that I say?
Okay, I'll start. Okay. Well, I'll start by not calling you an axe murderer. But know that we all have the potential inside of us. So in terms of metta, it's not, some people have access to it very easily and others don't, and some people it's again, as I was mentioning in the talk, we're developing a skill, and that skill might take a long time. It might take a long time to resolve. One of the things in the moment that I was thinking of when you're wishing someone well, but you're not feeling it, is to ask yourself, like, well, I'm having this intention right now. My intention is not to, I was on the plane coming over here from Portland. It was a very short flight. And there was a fellow behind me, and he was, in every 5 minutes, I would hear. And I thought, may he get some sleep, and, not have his sleep apnea, and, So I was trying to generate goodwill, but it wasn't a lot. I wasn't annoyed. But the guy next to me, every time this guy saw me, look back, he'd scowl at him, he'd look back. And I'm thinking, I better not fall asleep. and I thought, like, oh, sad person. I mean, he was a nice guy. He got my bag afterwards. He was very nice. But I could see that he was stuck in this aversive state, and nothing was coming of him looking back. The guy was still asleep, and he was just kind of moving into that angry zone of, like, if I look at the person, I'll identify all my anger and shove it down their throat, kind of just that feeling of wanting to look angrily at somebody, but he was asleep, so there wasn't, and I just thought, like, oh, I'm sorry that for that person that he, so I went more towards compassion, like, oh, if he only knew about metta and the intention towards metta, then he might, so the thing that I would think about, he might just have thought, like, oh yeah, I kind of like falling asleep too, and, like there might be a different response, even if there's aversion. So a lot of times metta is just opening ourselves up to an alternative of that sense of, like, how can I kind of feel differently about this moment, this experience, so that I can kind of be okay with what is unpleasant right now. Just kind of feeling that sense of, like, okay, this is unpleasant within me. I don't want that to exist. This feeling of not really wishing someone well. And so that can be your intention. Is like, well, may I someday, experience this emotive feeling, this sense of wishing, this well-wishing towards another. And so it's honoring that intention that you have, because you could be the guy who I sat next to. It was just like, there's no intention there. It was just, this is how I respond to anger, is just to look, there's no positive intention or a metta intention. So I think just also honoring that intention in you and just remembering that, because that will hopefully decrease the frustration that it's not there, or you feel like an imposter or something like that. Because oftentimes it's the expectation that we do better and become better, and I've got to get this right, that's sort of driving the metta away, because we're not having metta towards ourselves. That's what's happening in that moment. What I hear is you're not opening up a sense of well-being within yourself, because you're not getting that kind of what you want. And it's normal to try to want something. This is what we're doing this for. It's not like a bad thing to want that this practice works out for us, or our cultivating works out for us. And I was thinking the other thing is to also search for something that you feel metta for. So as I was saying, metta is about kind of you're kind of like starting an engine up, and sometimes there's no fuel in the engine, or it hasn't been started in a while. So you got to kind of, add some grease here and oil there and find some fuel. And so try to think of something you have metta for. So if I said, if you have like a little baby in your arms, you might think, what is that like? If I picture myself holding a baby that's kind of cooing, it's not crying, it's cooing, and it's it's kind of looking at me and laughing and giggling. But you might be baby averse, so that might not work. So then you find something else, like a kitten. So I think like a kitten or a puppy dog. How many people like have a kitten or a puppy dog in their hands? I'm going to say something not so nice, and they just want to crush it. Most people don't, right? If you're here and you do, then maybe come see me later. But if you can understand that sense of just like holding this thing, it's not like freaking out, it's not kind of getting you angry, it's just in a nice state. It's purring, if it's a kitten, it's safe in your hands. Or a puppy dog that's just like, it's got its head curled around your neck or whatever, and you I can see you're smiling right now. So that's that kind of sense of metta, this sense of like, oh yeah, like I wouldn't wish harm on that being, so there's that kind of feeling. And so that's a generative feeling. You're actually doing something to feel this experience and then use that because you recognize it. You need to recognize what well-wishing feels like, because otherwise if you don't recognize it, it might be kind of new, or it might be adjacent to kind of like feeling sorry for somebody rather than kind of recognizing how your own suffering can be there. So, it's also kind of looking at oneself and looking at like, well, ask yourself, do I have metta for myself? Can I figure out how to get that going? And so sometimes just whatever the skill is in trying to recognize that emotion and then approximating it within yourself when you have the opportunity to do it. So I think that's what I would find very useful in terms of trying out metta when you feel like it's not there. And it takes skill. It takes doing it over and over and over again. Yeah.
Ajahn Cunda has saved and reared many, many kittens. If you want to learn more, ask him. Do any of our venerables on the other side of the Buddha have any thoughts about metta when you don't necessarily feel it?
Yeah, I think even though I'm been practicing Tibetan tradition, but I've been interested in the metta meditation of the theravada, and I forgot who said this, but I remember they said, "Fake it until you make it." So at the beginning, my well wishes actually is really fake. It's come from my mouth, not from my heart. But I think gradually, if you really develop a lot of understanding of what's going on with the person, then your well wishes really become very sincere and very genuine. And I believe metta meditation is the most powerful meditation in Buddhism, because I used to be very judgmental and critical. When I see somebody, I have some like a negative thought, a negative feeling about the person. For example, any world leaders. But now, every day I want to say, may all the world leaders be happy, may they be well, may they have clarity, wisdom, and morality to come up with all the policy that bring peace, harmony, and prosperity to all nation. And it's very helpful. Before I got angry at some of them, but now I think like so. You have to practice like day by day, and I remember one of the metta that Bhikkhu Bodhi, the four immeasurable that Bhikkhu Bodhi wrote, is very powerful to me, and I recite it every day. He said, may I develop a heart of boundless, loving kindness and great compassion, intent on promoting the happiness and well-being of all beings. So, but first of all, I think for metta meditation to work, we have to begin with ourselves, and so we are less judgmental or have negative feeling about ourselves, and then gradually we can extend that well wishes to other people, and that way it works. But we have to be practice every day and practice sincerely, diligently, and then I think the fruit of metta really powerful. Yeah, it changed my mind a lot, because before I always think about myself. But for example, before my meal, I always think, oh, I'm very grateful that I have all the cause and condition to have the food and everything, like the four requisite. But now, before I eat, I want to say, may first, I show my gratitude to nature, to the element, to all the kindness and support of all beings. But now I say, may all beings, including myself and including human and animal, may the hunger and may the poor and the hunger, may the homeless, may the people and animals who got impacted by man-made disaster, natural disaster, and living the war zone have the food and everything like me. So I think it helps your heart more open, and it's amazing. So.
Thank you, Venerable Pinde. Great question, Tanner. Actually, see if any of the other Venerables, Venerable Silananda, Venerable Pundit, any thoughts? Venerable Pundit? Please. No? Okay.
We have a couple of people online with questions.
Just one, I think, two tiny follow-up thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah, your wish for all world leaders to have metta and morality hasn't worked yet.
Well, I continue. I don't give up yet. One day.
She says she doesn't give up, has not given up yet.
Might come true.
You know, that same thought, as Venerable Pinde said, came to my mind, the fake it till you make it.
Yes, I
And
forgot who said that.
It's so good. And a new phrase for everybody is met it till you get it. As in, like, send metta till you get it. We had a monk brother, twin of mine, a twin monk brother who had this practice of metta. He would go down the line of monastics, like thinking, okay, metta, 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 to each monastic, metta, metta, metta. I don't like that one, doesn't matter, metta, metta. Just boom, boom, boom. So you can do that, yeah.
Another, I mean, it's a question that I think all of us have had to deal with, so it's a really key one. And I'd say, you know, in the Karaniya Metta Sutta, it's often translated as one develops a loving kindness towards all beings as a mother would her only child. But another translation of that that's valid is one cares, one protects the feeling of love like a mother would her only child. And that's a much more humble intention, and it acknowledges, like Ajahn Cunda was saying, the goal isn't who you're exactly sending it to, it's to cultivate that, kindle that flame effectively. So kittens are great baby owls, good go-to. And I think the important of also sometimes we don't wish worldly success for certain beings because we know that's not actually what's going to make them happy. So if there are those world leaders who we're having trouble with, may they know the freedom of non-greed. May they know the happiness of non-hatred. May they find peace so that they don't hurt others. Because greed, hatred, and delusion are fires that burn one along with others. They're bringing themselves in immense suffering. And then also just to cultivate it towards real metta practice often requires agility, where instead of giving it to others, just acknowledging, oh, actually, it really hurts to be aversive and angry. Like just feeling that in ourselves and having loving kindness for ourselves, which is a much more human and humble motion of heart, but very authentic metta. And once that flame gets going, then you can bring things to mind. Who watched the Amanda Knox interview, which we did? So you'll remember Amanda Knox, she just had these, newborns, and she'd spread metta to her children, then her prosecutor, then herself, then her children, her prosecutor, then herself, just blending the love. And I think that can be really, really powerful. And the final thing is, Teja Dhamma says, this is counterintuitive, but can you take it to the lowest common denominator? Like, would I wish this person to starve? And often the heart, if it's really challenged, it says no. No, I want them to be able to actually be healthy and have enough to eat. And so I don't know if that applies, how much all this is relevant to people sleeping behind you on the airplane, but I think, it's a key issue. And then stepping back into the 4 satipatthana, equanimity, if loving kindness isn't accessible, just noting, okay, this is what it feels like to be kind of numb or aversive, and that's okay too. I think we have enough for one more, yeah?
We have got Mary online, Mary Webster.
Mary, go for it.
Hello, Ajahn. Hello, Aya. It's so wonderful to see you. I am asking a question for Glenn Coos, who cannot speak. So here's the question. I'm sorry if there's an echo. It's a short question. Ajahn Cunda, how does one approach attention setting, moving forward with practice and life aspirations without getting caught, lost in future and wanting, i.e. grasping? I'll turn off my audio.
Okay. So I mean, I think it's not so easy to engage in this practice in general, engage in what we're doing. As I was mentioning, cultivating is not an easy thing, and so that grasping can occur a lot. I was just reminded, as you said that, one of the monks who I grew up with, Ajahn Kasapo, he's a Chinese American monk, and he wasn't really interested in gardening, but he is now, and he has been for a little while, and he does grow things from seeds, and he's a bit of a curmudgeon-y monk in general, but I love him, and I in many ways aspire to be like him and follow his practice. But when he, as he does kind of this gardening and stuff with the help of others, a lot of the stuff just dies and doesn't work out, and I think about it, and I said, how do you? Because I did that at a Baigiri a little bit. I was like, I would get pretty disappointed when something would fall apart, and that's our practice, is to really look at that. And he just says, I don't care, and not about my question, but just about the fact of they die. And I thought, wow, that is amazing. Like, you're putting effort into this, but you're not so concerned with the wrong, something going wrong. It's like, so with our own practice, I mean, when grasping comes up, it's sort of natural. We want things to go our way, and it doesn't always go our way. Or we want a state that we've encountered to be positive or quite blissful or happy or whatever, and we're like, oh, may that, I have to keep that going. And then we try to recreate it, and it doesn't work, because the whole recreation of it is based on one's desire, right? I'm just trying to get this thing. And then we're also sometimes lost because we don't realize that it's not about feeling good. It's not about always having pleasant experiences. A lot of it is just being okay with the unpleasant. And that that's another translation of metta. So really looking at grasping, I think a little bit of forgiving ourselves when we're grasping, because it's normal. It's just like, that's what we're trying to uproot, so why would we expect it's just not going to be there for a very, very long time? But we want to see in ways that we have been able to let go, and we want to see that we've succeeded in those ways, whatever they are, minor or great. And that sometimes, we're doing our best. We're trying to cultivate this letting go of the grasping that we're carrying around so much. And just as I mentioned, I don't remember suggesting that there was any axe murdering, but I can understand that I might have said something like that. But, there's just that kind of like, how many lifetimes has we been doing this? How many lifetimes? And even if you don't want to kind of think, wow, lifetimes and those Buddhists, God, who knows? But you can think, well, how many times in your own lifetime do you just kind of keep going with the same habits over and over again? And you're like, oh, I just really want to stop this, but I can't. And then just to know, that is powerful. It's very powerful to have the intention to do it, but it's very powerful to move against that. It's really hard to not grasp, to not let go. And so I think also just having a balance in mind around, it's just a habit that we're working on, and also just to be a bit lenient, like maybe this lifetime I won't be able to let go of all grasping, but I'm trying, I'm doing my best. And just not be so hard on ourselves, just because that is the root. The Buddha talks about desire as being the root of our suffering, unwholesome desire. That's an important thing. It's not wholesome desire that's the root. So if someone says, so I have to let go of my generosity, nope. Grasp the generosity. I should let go of my kindness because that's desire. Nope. Grasp onto kindness. So there are some things to pick up and grasp. And we want to try to identify when we can actually grasp onto those wholesome things. And then when we're having trouble letting go of the other ones, then we just know that it's been a long time we've been carrying these habits around, and we're just doing our best, and just try to make little leeways into there. You see maybe you really like apples, and you see two apples. You've heard this probably many times, and you just say, okay, well, I am going to have an apple, but I'll take the smaller one, and then just see what that's like for oneself. Because you might find, oh, that was all I needed. I wanted the bigger one, but I didn't recognize it in my own mind that was possible, that I would be satisfied with the thing that I thought that I wasn't going to be able to get. I wanted that thing. But then that grasping gets let go of. And again, I want to encourage that investigation of afterwards. We're trying to be scientists of the mind. So we want to remind ourselves to look at what is the result of what we're doing. That's my answer there.
Yes, if you want to learn more about wholesome grasping or kittens, not at the same time, you can ask Ajahn Cunda after this. But we will have to move on with the rest of the morning, going to our blessing braid. This is something on our website and also something